I bid you all good morning, good evening, and good night, wherever you may be watching this transmission. It is I, Mike Martins. Big hug to everyone out there watching, and welcome to Part 2, The Civil War of the Elites, Part 2, with our man, Supreme Cannon.
Hi again. How are you doing, everybody?
And he's back in black, and he's not only that, he's a bat out of hell, because we got all the comments on the first video that we're going to address, and this Part 2 is called All Dressed Up and Ready to Play. Are you ready to play, Supremo?
Sure, let's go for it.
All right, let's do this. All right, guys, let's open her up. Back to the links that were up there yesterday. Okay, guys, remember, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I'll leave a link at the end of this video to the Part 1 if you missed it, and I'm going to link Part 1 to this video so people could chain link videos and continue watching this as a series, the mini-series on the channel. So here it is. We got Civil War of the Elites, Part 1 Introduction. Now, let's go over this. Now, I got Supreme Cannon's comment first and foremost pinned up top. So, he says, there are many theories and theorists. The truth is most likely found in the overlap. Think of the Venn diagram. Some of you are better informed on certain subjects. Please add your thoughts. And that's a really good one, right? That's a really good comment to be pinned on top because we want to hear from everybody. So, now, you have it open on your side, Supreme. What is the couple of comments here do you want to address?
Okay, well, I'm just going to scroll down here. Okay, Grant Bennett. Trump has given FEMA full control. I've heard that too. Atomized Asteroid said something similar. Apparently, control's been handed off to FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Administration. I don't know if that's true or not, guys. That's news to me because I'm not seeing any FEMA representatives at these press conferences. It's still mostly Trump asking the questions and answering the questions. So, please feel free to expound on that or show everybody a link to where it says that FEMA now has full control of the country. Mm-hmm. I'd be interested to know that. I'd probably Google it later. This was actually news to me until I saw that, and I just
it would be under an executive order, but why would it go against himself?
Yeah, well, the president in a national emergency, the president has authority. I mean, FEMA is just another administration. The idea that they have suddenly taken over control of the country, that doesn't wash. Number one, Senate and Congress would not stand for that, and I'm pretty sure the president himself wouldn't stand for that. So I don't think that's the case. This is a fairly unprecedented situation. The potential amount of control that Trump has right now is probably larger than even FDR had during the war.
Okay,
and he had a fair amount of leeway.
Yeah. We got Amy Wall here in the comments twice mentioning Israel, and she always points out Israel in every video.
Yeah. Okay. Well, where Israel's concerned, Israel obviously is a deep, complicated subject, whether you're a Christian or not. Mm-hmm. Okay. There are a lot of people that believe that little piece of oceanfront property in the Eastern Mediterranean is a fulfillment of biblical prophecy. But you could make biblical arguments that that's not the case. Mm-hmm. You don't even have to be a skeptic. Right. You could argue that the current incarnation we have there is at best a partial fulfillment. Okay, that's just covering the biblical angle. Now let's get into the practical matter of nation states operating in the world. The Zionist state, okay, obviously has a lot of influence in Washington. Okay, it has a lot of influence in culture in the developed world, in entertainment in the developed world, and in education and in finance, obviously, in the developed world, and really all over the world by extension. So the question has always been, okay, well, is this because of favoritism? Is this because of an agenda? Is it because, they're God's chosen people being put in charge of everything? God almighty, there's all kinds of interpretations for why that might be the case. Israel is central to American foreign policy. There's no question about it. And their influence in media, education, and culture in the rest of the developed world is uncontestable. It's there. Mm-hmm. The question is it benign or is it malignant? right? And the jury's out on that because there's a lot of famous researchers and computer scientists and educators and medical people who have done a lot of good for the world, who
Yes.
happen to be Jewish, not necessarily Zionist. I want to make sure and make a difference there. Okay.
Hmm.
Zionism is not in and of itself religious in its origins. It's not a matter of, okay, this is God bringing the people back to the land of Abraham. Okay. Zionism is a different animal entirely. It's predominantly
Because the
secular.
last time that was done was during the when the Babylonians released the Jewish, they allowed them to go back home, right?
Yeah, that's right.
It was
Yeah, the time
80
of
years of captivity. They had 80 or 90 years of captivity in Babylon, and they were all, I guess, allowed to return.
that's right. There was a contingent that was permitted to return during the time of Nehemiah or Nehemiah to go back to Jerusalem and rebuild the wall. And at a certain point in time, the temple was also rebuilt
Hmm.
and rededicated at that time. And that's the temple that existed in Jesus' time.
Right.
So, and that's a deep subject. We could get into that too. All right, on another time. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, Israel is a leader in tech. They're a leader in medicine and agriculture. Israel, for being a little piece of desert with not much water, supplies most of citrus that Europe buys that they don't get from countries like Greece and the Mediterranean European countries.
Hmm.
So I mean, they're an economic powerhouse, an agricultural powerhouse in a lot of ways, a military powerhouse, obviously. But when you're as surrounded as enemies by they are, yeah, you want powerful friends and you want powerful weapons on your side. That would just be common sense, obviously.
Hmm.
Now, whether it exists legitimately or not, I'll leave to all you to debate on your own time. Okay. The fact is that we're dealing with what is right now. And actually, Benjamin Netanyahu alluded the other day that Israel isn't a democracy, that there's a deep state running it as well. So whether he was coming out as an operative of that deep state
Hmm.
or he was
I saw
trying to
that
deflect
actually.
blame, yeah, he was trying to deflect blame somewhere else. I wouldn't claim to know what his motives are. We're saying for that, for saying that.
Hmm. We
But
got
yeah, no, it's complicated there too. They're not monolithic there either. There's a lot of groups fighting each other in Israel
And
as
that's
well.
back. It goes back to the elite civil war, right?
It goes back to an elite civil war. Yeah, yeah. There's always behind the scenes things going on that do affect your daily life. I don't think anybody can dispute that. So
So everyone's at a birthday party, and and they're all basically all the elites are invited to one birthday party, but they're all separated in different parts of a room because they don't want to be seen talking to somebody, or they don't want to show. You know what I'm saying? That's almost how
hmm
I'm feeling it as. You know?
Well, if you think of an actual government rather than a shadow government, right? Like a large state will have all kinds of different departments that will operate as silos
Hmm.
because they're in charge of different responsibilities.
Right.
They don't interact with each other a lot. They
No.
all take their direction from the cabinet above them and the decisions that are taken there, but they don't necessarily interact with each other that much. Okay, if you've seen any kind of just the web of corporate ownership of the world's economy, like that's a spider's web all by itself. There'd be very few people who could, who really don't interact because they work in completely different businesses
Hmm.
and different disciplines. Okay, and yet they are all somewhere up the chain taking directions from, the same group, right?
Oh,
Who's making decisions for them to carry out, even if they're not completely aware of each other's existence. That's the idea of a shadow government that I'm alluding to.
decarpamentalization.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, compartmentalization. I've said that they're not monolithic. Cyrus Shedrazar had said yes, they are. He is probably more right than I am in that regard,
Hmm.
as in that the leadership at the top, being a smaller number, obviously is going to be fairly monolithic, but the mess, the web, the swamp, if you will, that they preside over, they don't interact with each other that much, but they all, past a certain point, get their instructions from the same group.
We
I'll
got
leave it at that.
and Tony Evans saying 20 hours ago, all roads lead to Rome, Vatican prayer hall inside a head of a snake.
Yeah, that kind of riffs off what I said about rulers of evil. Angela, you're right. That doesn't go very deep, but think about the level of research you've done compared to the amount of research that that the average person has done, including myself. Like I'm fairly widely read, but I've researched this stuff kind of shallowly, right? I usually read enough to form a conclusion, and then I file it in a cabinet somewhere and on to the next thing. So some of you have very detailed knowledge, and it would be good to call in and share some of it with us.
Mm-hmm.
It's nice to see you in the comments because you always have something informative to say, and I appreciate it. I honestly miss Ben Persons. He hasn't seemed to be commenting in a while. He's usually fairly entertaining.
Mm-hmm. We got Stephen Sewell saying, Trump will bring down the Federal Reserve. Full confidence here.
Yeah, well, the chief thing about the Federal Reserve is it's like anything else. It's a conspiracy that hid in plain sight, right? It's most of the things that control people's lives hide in plain sight. They don't question their control, or at least they don't question why it might be harmful for these things to control them. And in the end, because they're these shadowy things that you can't walk down the street and slap the president of CBS across the head, right? He lives in New York City, right? Or they live in Hollywood, or it's the programming coming into your house and over your computer and through your governments, through your educational system, through advertising,
mm-hmm.
right? And a lot of it is symbolism that is hidden in plain sight. In a way, they mock you and they mock your God.
Right.
Because they have these things that maybe you don't know are sinister or satanic or intended to be black magic or destructive in some way, but they know, and you walk by it every day. It's when you think about it, it's the most passive aggressive basement dweller kind of freaking religion in the world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's like that guy in China who was wiping his nose on the top of cans because he had coronavirus. Like what kind of a doorknob would do something like that?
Well, there's people for everything, right? So
there's people for everything. Yeah. But this, again, it's something that's enforced by a code of silence, right? And symbolism. They communicate with symbols.
Yes.
And code words and phrases.
And unified.
And everybody understands it's unified either through greed, all right, or it's through fear.
Mm-hmm.
Fear of blackmail, okay, character assassination, or sometimes real assassination. How many celebrities and financial people have been found over the last, say, 10 years hanging from a doorknob? That's a calling card.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That isn't just sending a message to the rank and file who think this is all strange. It's also sending a message, okay, to the rank and file in their own organizations that there are certain boundaries you don't cross and things you don't say because we're watching you all the time.
Isn't that a song by the Police?
Yeah, I think so.
Every breath you take. Okay, let's move on.
Yeah,
let's move on to
not such a romantic song when you think about it nowadays.
Okay, let's go to Wikipedia. Elite.
Okay.
In a political or sociological theory, the elite, to select or to sort out is a French word, are a small group of powerful people who hold a disproportionate amount of wealth, privilege, political power, or a skill in society. Defined by the Cambridge Dictionary, the elite, those people or organizations that consider the best or most powerful compared to others of similar type. Mm-hmm. So it goes into Mill states. And Mills states that the power elite members recognize other members' mutual exalted position in society. As a rule, they accept one another as a rule. So they got these ground rules now.
Yeah.
They understand one another. They marry one another. They tend to work and think, if not altogether, at least alike.
Yeah.
It is a well-regulated existence where education plays a crucial role. Youthful upper-class members attend prominent preparatory schools, which not only open doors to such elite universities such as Harvard, Columbia, Dartmouth College, Yale, Princeton, but also to the university's highly exclusive clubs. These memberships, in turn, pave the way to prominent social clubs located in all major cities and serving as sites for important business contacts.
Sure.
Wow. So that's a little bit of what Wikipedia is telling us about elite and what elitism works, and that's pretty much hitting the nail right on the head.
Yeah, if you think of high society, for example, in America, they have these events every spring, I believe, called coming out parties or debutante balls.
Mm-hmm.
They're basically, the next generation of the elites being shown off as potential mating stock.
Yeah.
Right. When you think about it, it's like a dog and pony show for the next generation of sons and daughters to get hooked up with each other and continue to build these networks of wealthy and powerful people to keep that wealth and power within the group. Now in a meritocracy like America, obviously there are people that can aspire, not just old money, but even new money that can aspire to join these groups. Whereas in Europe, the royal families would start to get badly, interbred to the point of inbred because there was too small of a group to choose mates from. And obviously these marriages weren't based on love either. I hasten to add, if there was love, it came later. The institution of marriage, however, that seems to have been how it's been for most people throughout life. The marriage came first, and hopefully the love grew later.
A lot of people don't know that up until the turn of the last century there, in the 20th century, right?
Yeah.
Until the turn of the century, universities and colleges for women where women were sent to these universities and colleges to potentially find a good mate to marry.
Apparently, there are a lot of women that go to college and university because that is where they want to get their quote-unquote MRS degree, right? Their Mrs. degree.
Mm-hmm.
Or they go into business and climb the corporate ladder. Now, of course, there are a lot of talented and ambitious women in the corporate world.
But I'm saying, like, back at the turn of the century, like late 1800s, early 1900s, a lot of families would send the prettiest of the bunch to these universities to see if they could score, right? And that's what the universities at that time saw a lot of it as at the time, right? And a lot of people, and just how much things have changed in the last 100 years is wow. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, there were preparatory schools and finishing schools, charm schools, that sort of thing. And the whole idea was to create a female bioweapon, if you will, a woman who was so beautiful and so cultured and so educated that she would literally be able to choose the man she wanted and he would follow along. Right, and their families had them trained that way. It was like the old imperial systems where, you would marry off your daughter to the son of a neighboring king in order to strengthen ties between the two kingdoms. Right.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
or even prominent families in a town or a city that would be encouraging their sons and daughters to get together in order to include their own power over an area, which stands to reason because marriage in and of itself, okay, or any union like that, is a union of two families, not just two people. That's part of the reason why a lot of marriages, I think, are controversial and they never seem to settle into a groove of happiness. Is because they don't keep in mind that it's not just the two people, it's also the two families.
And
if you're not family oriented, then why would you get married?
Well,
I don't mean that as a rhetorical question. I mean, if you're literally not family oriented, why would marriage be a factor in your thinking? And again, we're talking about elites, okay, mingling with each other to maintain their power. That's a different issue than, you or I getting married. But again, it's part of the maintenance and the carrying forward of that power and those mindsets into the next generation, into the future.
Okay, here it is. Elitist privilege. Men receive the education necessary for elitist privilege to obtain their background and contacts, allowing them to enter three branches of the power of the elite, which are political leadership, the military circle, or the corporate elite. Now, there's a comment that's made here, right here. It says, since the end of World War II, corporate leaders had become more prominent in the political process with the decline in central decision-making for professional politicians.
Okay.
That's scary.
Yeah. Well, I mean, corporations have gotten so large now that they exercise huge political influence all by themselves, right?
That's extremely dangerous, though.
Yeah, I mean, some corporations have can command more economic power than a lot of countries in the world. It is a frightening amount of power, yeah, especially in a supposed democracy or republic where one man, one vote kind of a thing, right? That people influence. It gets to the point where yeah, people might vote for one thing, okay, and if your corporate agenda does not want that one thing, well, then you go to that thing and you start lobbying it to change its policies. This is what's happened in the last 40, 50 years. I mean, we use America because America is the most powerful country in the world in a lot of ways, okay, not just financial and political, militarily, but also spiritual. It's a real Tower of Babel, and not because it's all ecumenical. Okay, it's like more like Mars Hill, right, where the Apostle Paul went to try to, find a place to start spreading his message. Right, he went to the equivalent of a spiritual Walmart and found a place where he found a soapbox basically where he could start. Well, in America, you can build your own soapbox. You can't do that in a lot of countries in the world.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
And then it goes on to say, unlike the ruling class, so let's open ruling class up here.
Okay.
And ruling class. Ruling class is the social class of a given society that decides upon the sets that the society political agenda.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you have a ruling elite, and it might be separate from the political elite per se, because the political elite can be replaced by voters.
It says here,
it's never a sure thing. You need a lot of money and a lot of media influence to keep a person in the same job for 30 years when they're up for election every 4 years, right?
Ruling class differs from the power elite. The latter simply refers to the small group of people with the most political power. Many of them are politicians, hired political managers, and or military leaders. The ruling class are people who directly influence politics, education, government with the use of wealth or power.
Mm-hmm.
So it goes back to hinder against the, when we're talking about the elite and corporate power. So it kind of, Supremely there?
Mm-hmm.
It sounded like you hung up there for a sec.
Oh, okay. No, sorry.
So now let's go into your favorite word. Okay. Marx says theoretician Nikolai Berkran anticipated the elite theory in his 1929 work, Imperialism and World Economy. Present-day state power is nothing but entrepreneurs. Company of tremendous power, headed even by the same persons that occupy the leading positions in the banking and syndicated offices. And he emphasizes here in the banking.
Sure. Yeah, politicians come and go. Right, but economies don't.
Right.
So, but over time, over a period of a few generations, you can influence public thought. You can influence religion. You can influence demographics. Obviously, there's a lot of things you can influence that will change. That will change the reality. The reality that we live in isn't the same one that our great-great-grandparents lived in. For better and for worse.
Right.
A lot of things have changed, and a lot of it was just natural progress, right? Technology and, intelligence, better nutrition, better education. Obviously, people are going to start making more sound choices, and they're going to live long enough to make those sound choices and implement them. So there's a lot of things that have, resulted in the different world that we live today that aren't evil, right? They're not part of an agenda. They're just natural. It's the breakdown of moral cohesion and cultural cohesion and social cohesion and family cohesion, right? Those things aren't natural. The natural bonds that people have operated with for a long time are being broken down in front of us. Some of us are over, I'm over 50 now. I've been watching this melt down my entire life. And it seems like it's not making anybody happy, and yet everyone keeps going that way.
It kind of reminds me of that movie, The American Ruling Class.
The American Ruling Class, yeah.
From 2004, 2003? Independent film?
Okay. Yeah, there've been a few.
So let's go back to your... Now, let's get into some meat and potatoes. We're dressed up. We're ready to play. We saw at Wikipedia what they define the ruling class or the elite as. We kind of went through a few comments. And now let's talk... Who's at war? Who do you think is at war with who? Is it the Czech giants are now going to war against the politicians at play? Are the politicians going at war with the corporations? Is it the corporations moving in on what do you see moving around on that chessboard?
Well, where the it's the exposure of things that a lot of journalists and investigators have known have been a problem for a very long time, that have been alluded to in print media, in films over the years. Okay, one word that's become familiar to a large number of people now is the word adrenochrome. Okay, which is you can Google that. I'm not going to describe the process here, but the idea is that you have these secrets that are used to blackmail people and to keep them in line.
Oh,
Okay.
you know that
All right.
the mafia. We talked about this a few months back. The mafia. The reason why a lot of political figures, police chiefs, they don't crack down on the mafia, and they know where they're located, where they live, and what they're doing, is because they have so much leverage on them. Whether it's photos taken of them, cheating on their wives and all kinds of stuff, that the mafia has more leverage. They're not paying off these police; they have leverage against them.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Now, if that person in a position of responsibility has got enough clout, all right, and you have something on them, okay, or you're supplying something on the QT, okay, it's not just necessarily a matter of threatening someone with the destruction of their character, okay, or threatening a family member, for example, okay, it's also a matter of bribery. It's a matter of, hey, if you'll sign this document, we'll set you up for, We'll give you a hall pass from your old lady so you can go to Vegas and hang out with Bubbles and Tiffany. You know what I mean? There's all kinds of ways that you can identify leverage over a person that you want to exert that leverage over. So obviously, when I talk about a civil war, you look at the American Civil War, okay, as an example. It wasn't actually fought primarily over slavery. Slavery was the leverage.
Oh no,
slavery was the leverage used by the North,
of
in
course,
order to garner international support for the war,
and
but also to continue the northern people to continue to support it, because the casualty lists were enormous.
And a lot of people don't know how once slavery or slaves were free, a lot of people don't understand how the North held slaves 7 years longer than the South. Or 6 or 7 years. I'm not sure how many years longer than the South did.
The 13th Amendment or whatever it was. Yeah, it freed slaves in the southern states. It didn't free them anywhere else.
No, and also they don't
Lincoln
discuss
was
how
different.
There was a lot of regiments, black regiments that fought for the South.
Yeah,
a lot.
The movie Glory from 1989 is about one of those regiments that fought in the Civil War. Yeah, and even then they were treated with discrimination by the North.
Right.
I mean, what they needed was warm bodies and uniforms to stop enough Confederate bullets to win the war. It was just basically human wave tactics. Right. And they didn't care where they came from. I mean, they imported boatloads of people from Germany and Ireland and wherever else to come.
For the North. Ireland was for the North.
Yeah, as long as they promised that they were going to put on a Union uniform and go carry a musket and risk getting their head blown off, then they could become a citizen. So that's all they needed, was a human wave. But when it came down to the outbreak of the actual war, it's like, okay, well, you've got an area that was part of a nation, of a political entity, and now all of a sudden it's seceded, and oh boy, what do we do? Well, they had to organize an army, and they had to try to drum up some kind of diplomatic support from overseas. They had to figure out how they're going to pay for all this stuff without any real industry. They had problems. Right, in order to, and most of it was a struggle against the elite of the South versus the elite of the North. I mean, there used to be duels fought with pistols and swords in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, instead of dragging two complete regions of why don't they just drag the two guys that are quarreling over the North and South and get them to duel it out on the street, and instead of sacrificing all, you know what I'm saying, right?
Well, the problem, that's a common sentiment. Why don't the elites just fight? Why don't they
Right.
just get in the ring and fight? But the assumption is that, whoever wins and loses, everybody else in the country is going to go along with it. Well, all you have to do is say, well, they cheated. And then what's going to happen?
Hmm.
Everyone's going to wind up fighting anyway, right? It would be like Trump and say, Guy Verhofstadt of the EU getting into a ring and a cage match.
Hmm.
Okay, and so Guy Verhofstadt, pulls some fancy move and gives the people's elbow to Donald Trump. So what does that mean? That everybody in the United States has to join the EU now? They're not going to go for that.
Right.
Of course not. No,
Right.
I mean all countries are different, and there's good reasons why they're different. We're not all the same.
Hmm.
We're not. We've separated by thousands of years of time and thousands of years of distance, and yeah, we're human beings.
Our
We're Homo
genetics, our
sapien
thoughts,
sapiens.
our everything.
Genetics, our thoughts, our cultural inclination, a lot of that is shaped by the environment that your people emerged in, your culture emerged in. Yeah, you don't just mix that up in a blender. It's like oil and water. You can, as long as you keep stirring it up, you can keep it blended. But if you leave it long enough, yeah, it starts to settle out again.
Right. It does.
So that's in a way okay, and I'm going to use that actually to segue into this concept of an elite civil war.
Hmm.
This blender that we've all been going through, this MK Ultra operation, writ large in media and politics and everything else over the last 60 years or so, obviously has created a lot of disaffected people as well.
Right.
Right. So you've got an elite that's running things, but then you also have outsiders in the same place. And they're the same way. They got elected. They got promoted through the corporate ranks. They were born into money, but they weren't part of the, quote unquote, hidden elite, if you will. Okay, let's just go with that for now. So you're going to reach a point where they're really not happy with the way things are going, but they're not sure how to stop it. So I think that we have seen, and I'm going to use American history as an example because that's the one that everyone has eyes on for the most part, okay?
Hmm.
Because they're the biggest light and the biggest noise in the world is American media, let's face it.
Hmm.
All right. I think the first attempt that you saw of an outright rebellion was JFK,
Right.
right? Because he spoke out about it. He touched the third rail and talked about secret societies and how he was going to, I mean, Churchill and Woodrow Wilson, there are others who certainly talked about it.
Eisenhower did.
Eisenhower talked about the military-industrial
Industrial
complex.
complex, and then we had
Yeah.
Jimmy Carter too.
Jimmy Carter, yeah, Jimmy Carter's alluded to it. It doesn't matter if you're in or out of it. It's like there's a certain point in time where you do have to make a statement, right? You have to kind of reveal what's going on, and then if there is no public uprising about it, well, then it's just assumed that consent has been given, and then you just go ahead and do your thing, right? It's part of the game they play, is they hide things in plain sight, or they just tell you years in advance what's going to happen, and then when it happens, well, I guess it's okay because nobody stopped us, ha ha ha, right? That's what I mean. It's passive aggressive in a lot of ways. It really is kind of creepy. It's just, hey, we're gonna do that, Oh, I put snot on the doorknob for my grandma to touch, or something like that. Some people are just weird.
Hmm.
It's a gross image, but you understand what I mean, right? These people are doing nasty things practically in plain sight, and they just giggle. They think it's great that they're getting away with it, right?
Hmm.
So the second, obviously, we know what happened with JFK,
Right.
and most of the people that were witnessed or involved in it in any way turned up dead within a couple of years, which also sends a message.
And that's where you brought that whole JFK thing up. That's where they actually spun the word conspiracy theorist. People that were there that witnessed what happened, that gave their testament, were considered as a conspiracy theorist, and that's where that word spun from.
That's right. Yeah, it was a linguistic kill shot to shut down the debate once and for all. Say, oh, it's just a conspiracy theory. You people are weird, so that they can move on, right? Like the media completely smothered coverage of it. No, a large percentage. I would imagine even up to half of people in the United States, they knew very well that the CIA did it.
Hmm.
They know who killed Kennedy, right? But if the media is smothering it and everyone's just calling it a conspiracy theory and you're a bunch of weirdos and shut up and stop arguing. Right. And what happened eventually? Well, by the time by the time it finally died down, I mean, you had, JFK's face was on the money, right?
Hmm.
And there was an airport in New York named after him, and there's probably a library somewhere.
Tons of schools.
The Kennedy Center in New York. This outpouring of grief for a slain president, and the whole idea was to drown out the discussion about what actually happened to him until enough time went by that people stopped talking about it, and then you get away with it. There you go, right? 9/11. 9/11 was an occult sacrifice to some people. It happened on a specific date at a specific time, and the reason those towers fell as easily as they did is because they were built to do that at a specified time. And there's evidence for that. It doesn't mean that it explains it 100%.
No.
But these things, in terms of symbolism, they bear a lot of, it bears up under scrutiny. It's worth exploring further, right? And that's ultimately why everybody, all of us conspiracy enthusiasts on your channel, we go through this stuff. The idea is that we're trying to raise our own awareness about it. The second attempt at a civil war, at an overthrow, because when you talk about a shadow elite, you're always talking about what? The Illuminati, the Luciferians, the
skull and bone stuff,
the skull
all that
and
weird stuff, and
bones,
secret.
Yeah. Well, this is an old guard now. They've been around for a long, long time. So when I think of a shadow elite, I think of another group that is just as well informed, knows perfectly well what's going on, but is looking for a means to get into power to overthrow it. Okay.
Yeah.
I think the first attempt was in 1992 when Ross Perot, who was a billionaire, okay, charismatic little guy, plain talking, homespun kind of American character, right? And the contest was between Bill Clinton and George Herbert Walker Bush, the former director of the CIA,
right,
who was probably the guy who had JFK whacked.
Hold on, stop for 1 second.
Okay.
If you look at the picture of Lee Harvey Oswald walking out in handcuffs, George Walker Bush is standing against the wall by the door.
Oh yeah,
he's there.
Is that right?
He's actually in that. You guys could Google it and look it up. You'll see what I'm talking about. He's standing there. There's a circle of him standing there watching Lee Harvey Oswald being escorted out of that building just before he got shot by Jack Ruby.
Yeah, wouldn't that be funny if you're the guy ordering the hit and the guy's going to carry it out for you and you're watching there to make sure the job gets done correctly,
And the guy that tried to assassinate Ronald Reagan had George Walker's Bush phone number in his wallet.
Yeah, which is funny considering that, Bush at that time was the vice president of the United States, right? George Herbert. George Bush Sr. was not a nice man. Came across as a nice man and a mild-mannered man, but he was not a nice man. You're not director of the CIA unless you know where there are literal bodies buried, and some of them you put there yourself. That's just how it is. You're talking about espionage. You're talking about all of those rabbit holes. Okay. So I think when Perot was put forward, you need certain criteria if you're going to go against the media, go against the financial establishment, okay, and try to overthrow an entrenched elite, which has been running your country for 100 years. Number one, you need to have a good public reputation, or at least notoriety that's not negative. Okay, like you wouldn't run Pee Wee Herman, okay, as president of the United States, right? You'd need someone who was respectable, or who at least was well known and was not particularly,
I think Pee Wee Herman, in my opinion, Pee Wee Herman would do a better job than a better front man than Vegetable Joe.
Well, yeah. At this point in time, Pee Wee Herman could probably step in for Joe Biden, and they could
Joe Biden is what I meant.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they could deep fake him into existence at this point. Perot actually reached 38%. He had more popular support because he was anti-free trade. Right, he was anti-free trade with Mexico and Canada.
Right,
he was the one that used the term "giant sucking sound" of jobs going into Mexico. And he was right. He was completely right about what happened. The same thing happened in Canada 4 years earlier. Free trade was sold to us as this great vehicle of prosperity, and it was a lie. It was a complete lie. But he said that one of the candidates had threatened his family, and that's ultimately why he backed out of the race, even though at that point he was winning. And the candidate he named was George Bush.
Right.
He said George Bush had threatened his family. And of course, everybody said that was a conspiracy theory too. George Herbert Walker Bush was the former director of the CIA.
Hmm.
Right. And he was running to be vice president of the United States. I would not be surprised if in that position he was actually Bill Clinton's handler. I mean, it's not like they weren't on the same team in a lot of ways, but I have a feeling the vice president is there, to be the tail that wags the dog a little more directly.
That's
You know
but
what I
that's
mean?
but that's I mean that's a very big accusation to throw out there, especially as a front runner.
Well, sure. Absolutely. Yeah. To say,
So I don't
he
think you just
threatened my
make
family.
that up. I don't
Yeah.
think
And the
he'd
fun,
make that up.
and I think Perot was actually running at the time as a Republican. I think it was actually it's been 30 years ago. I don't remember exactly, but it seems to me it's similar to Trump. He was actually running to be the candidate for the Republican Party,
Hmm.
and he was running ahead of Bush. And um, this was after the Reagan presidency, obviously. And he got shut down. He got shut down. He tried to come back later as United We Stand America under his own party name, but by that time the momentum was broken. Right, it was only going to be the two established parties. Of course, the establishment media completely slagged the guy and just tarnished his reputation and made him look like a complete raving fool and a conspiracy theorist and everything else. That's their MO. That's how they do it. They destroy you. Right?
Ross Perot died last year,
Yeah, he did pass away. Yeah.
89 years old.
Yeah. This was 30 years ago when all of this happened. I
Hmm.
think this was their first concerted attempt. The guy had a guy who had his own money, had his own plane, had his own means of funding a campaign, who was able to actually go up against the established order.
Hmm.
I just think when it comes to Bush and Clinton, who didn't turn out to be that much different from each other. Uh, it wasn't time. Those guys were in the prime of their life. They were in their peak of their power. They already had made their bones working for the quote unquote deep state. And anybody going up against that would be like somebody from the outside walking in and say, I want to be the head of the Cosa Nostra.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
people
No.
that want to. So now let's get back to the whole elite entering the elitist. Well, okay, let me rephrase that. So even if somebody wants to come in and step on
Yeah.
a few toes and do the right thing for the people,
Yeah.
they're still going to be
Oh, they're in
basically
danger. They're
shown
in
the
danger
door.
from day one.
Huh?
Obviously, they're going to be in danger from day one.
Yeah.
I mean, all of these people get left hanging on doorknobs or shot, 3 times in the back, and it's ruled a suicide. That's sending a message. We're in control. You're going to go this far and no further. There's a red line. You cross it, you're dead. And just to torture you, we might kill some members of your family before we come to you. But from that point on, you are absolutely in trouble. Your days are numbered. Okay, so you've got to have somebody that is fully aware of that and is still willing to go through with it. So you're going to have to somewhere along the line assure their safety. Okay, you're going to have to show that we know where their power centers are and how we can bust them. These are the particular organizations that we need control of in order to do that. So this is something, if I go back to the assumption that it was the same people or the same kind of people who were supporting Perot and encouraging him to try to take the White House, then they probably learned a lot from that, and they derived another plan. The problem is that what are you going to do? You only have so many rich popular billionaires that you can use that might want to take on a task like that.
Yeah.
Right. And Trump is somebody who's floated the idea of being president since 1980. It's always theoretical, but he's floated the idea for a while. And it's possible that some people say, well, Trump was selected too. And you know what? I'm not going to argue with you. My assertion is he was selected by a different group of people.
Yes.
That's my assertion, because he has every sling and arrow you can consider has been thrown at him. You've got media personalities openly calling for his assassination, or the killing of his supporters, and they're not shy about it. It's like, yeah, Trump supporters need to die. Okay, like masks are dropping all over the place, and that's beautiful. That's exactly what we want. right?
We want to show, yeah, we want the light, the
Yeah. Yeah. How do you sort the wheat from the tares?
Mhm.
When they're all coming up in the field, they look identical. How do you know the difference between one and the other? It's when they ripen,
Right.
right? There comes a time and place when something happens and the mass dropped, and you find out who the tares are and who the wheat are. I'm using a biblical example. Anybody can understand the idea of, somebody operating on the down low, sleeper agents, controlled opposition. How do you put light on people like that? How do you show them? What kind of benchmark do you use?
Well, then it goes back to the elite. You shine the light, you show it, you give pretty much hand over the entire evidence and everything you need to solve the case to the police, and something happens, and it doesn't get solved.
And it doesn't get solved. So two things have happened. Number one, you've discovered that the police are crooked, and number two, you've just shone a great big spotlight upon yourself, right, as a target.
And many nice, beautiful people did the right thing and came forward with the smoking gun, and unfortunately, a lot of them have perished over this.
A lot of them have perished. Some of them have joked and said, if anything happens to me, just know it wasn't suicide. Ha, ha, ha. And then, a month later, they're dead.
Yeah. Really scary.
So guess what? It's like, you understand. Yeah, this crap is real. What's going on? So if you were going to take something like that down, even if it was just to build your own power base, okay, look at the career of Napoleon Bonaparte, for example. He went up against the crowned heads of Europe. He used the liberté, égalité, fraternité of the French Revolution, and he used it as momentum to send these mass armies to overrun most of the monarchies of Europe.
He was pretty much an independent.
I think it's more likely that he was.
You know why? Napoleon was...
I think the Enlightenment, the secular Enlightenment, I think influenced him a lot more than anything else. But the French Revolution itself might have been engineered, but I think Napoleon was the result they weren't counting on.
Right.
That's my take on it. So it's the same kind of thing. You have an engineered operation called the New World Order that apparently is inevitably going to come to your door and tell you to hold out your hand so you can take your ID 2020 vaccine, okay, and all that good stuff. But what if someone was using that for an opportunity, number one, to present an alternative, okay, even if it was a quote-unquote, secret society kind of a thing. Someone in the comments said that QAnon is a scam. Brother, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
No.
You know a famous scam of the last 50 years, and we talked about this before the show, Mike. Here's a famous scam for the last 50 years that a lot of people saw for a scam, and we're still dealing with it today. It's called the sexual revolution. That was a scam. That was an engineered operation. You can read about that all day long. They don't even hide it. Right? And that didn't work. It was a scam. Oh yeah, we don't have the highest divorce rate in the world. Birth rates and marriages haven't plunged. Two generations of children haven't grown up completely screwed up in the head. Right? Like our economies are teetering on the brink of collapse because of the windows that have been opened to, just the corporate regulations alone that have been extended to the entire population. And it was that was used as a cover. That was a completely AstroTurf campaign. And it worked beautifully.
It's like the Me Too one.
It's like the Me Too one too. Yeah. To shine a light on sexual abuse of women is always important. It is important.
Of course.
Keep some things in line, okay? But it was used for two other things. Number one, it was used as an avenue for all kinds of what were provably fake accusations that ruined men's lives.
Right.
Okay. So now it's created an environment where a lot of men refuse to talk to women in the workplace, even when they were friendly before. But the problem is that the women didn't have anything to do with it either. They didn't do this either. Somebody else claiming to speak for them did this. The other thing that happened is, and from my perspective, a more positive result is the calling out of guys like Harvey Weinstein and Jeffrey Epstein. But it shone a light on hypocrisy. I mean, they made a deal for money or fame, and now they want to take the deal back later, right? So there's a certain amount of hypocrisy for that. But at the same time, Weinstein led to Epstein, which shone a light on Pizzagate, right? Adrenochrome, the really, really dark underbelly where, the serious nuclear level blackmail is taking place,
Right. For years.
right? Yeah, a prominent, clergyman or politician or something with a video of them, getting it on with Bambi from the club, right? That's one thing. Okay. Draining the blood from an infant is a different level
Yeah.
of blackmail, right? I mean, that's omerta. You are in for life,
Well, you know
right?
what?
In a case
I don't
like
think so anymore. Not at no,
yeah,
not anymore. Not the elite. No. You could hand over a proof of abductions of whatever and I don't want to get into technical, but and a smoking gun, and if it's the wrong elite, either like again, the messenger is gone.
Well, the whole idea of the media is a net to capture that stuff, right? You have compromised people in police departments, obviously in major law enforcement like the FBI and the CIA. They're good people there too, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
There's good people everywhere. The majority of them are probably good. It's the problem is you've got that 10 or 20% that are using the the good reputation of these organizations to conduct unspeakable things, right? And the reluctance of the average person to question those things gets played on.
It does.
Come on, that's a conspiracy. The FBI
it
would never do
automatically
that.
gets.
Come on, don't be ridiculous. Oh, you're right. And the whole idea is to control your mind by someone saying, "Oh, you don't agree with the narrative? Well, that's ridiculous. You're being foolish. You're being silly.
Yeah.
Why do you hate us so much?" Right? It's just linguistic kill shots, right? They attack your ego, they attack your reasoning, and they make you think that you're alone and there's nothing you can do about it. There are probably a lot of whistleblowers that have decided not to blow the whistle, that have explosive information, but they've decided that they'd rather live and have a family instead.
Right.
You know what I mean?
On the show,
and it is that serious. It is that harsh. I mean, we've seen it in real time.
Yeah, we're here on the show. We're just trying to smooth out the edges here. What are we trying to do here? We're just trying to smooth out the edges, kind of look at different avenues or look at different, you know what I'm saying? Like trying to see a perspective from a different angle once in a while. Maybe kind of underlying things that maybe we could connect. But we're not trying to break anything here by all means, or you know what I'm saying, right? That's going to put us hanging from a lamppost, but we're just discussing things so things don't get forgotten, so people understand, you know, when they are connecting the dots. And when there's someone sitting in some hotel room that they've rented out and they've completely plagiarized the entire wall with news articles and throwing up strings to connecting them all and trying to find out the answer to this stuff. Maybe might get the answer one day. You know what I'm saying? But if we start forgetting certain events,
remember when we said yesterday's segment about tracing it to the root. What's the root of this thing? The root of the Nazi Party in Berlin, for example, in World War II. Okay, obviously was the Reichschancellor's palace, right? Okay, well, no problem. We'll just go in there and we'll just haul Hitler out and we'll kill him, or we'll put him in jail. That'll be the end of it. Well, no, there was a massive army. At the height of World War II, the Wehrmacht had 20 million men in uniform.
That's right.
Like it was and one of the most advanced industrial economies in the world, arguably more advanced because it had been completely rebuilt.
From World War II, from World War I,
the military industrial complex from the Great War had been completely rebuilt and modernized. So initially they had a hell of an advantage. You had to deal with them. You had to deal with everything in front to get down to the root, right? You have to, in order to take that axe to the root of a tree, there's usually branches hanging over your head that you've got to clear first to get into the root of it.
That's cool. Well, a lot of dirt. I think you got to clear some dirt.
Yeah, that's right.
Right, metaphorically, let's clear some dirt so we can
right.
get to so we can start seeing some root.
Yeah. No, I think if you had a group, and it would be a small group in order for secrecy. Okay, that was a faceless group in the halls of power that identified a weak point, a thermal exhaust port in the Death Star, if you will.
Hmm.
Okay, just to use that example. Because the funny thing about Star Wars, it seems every time there's this intergalactic empire, there's always a plucky rebel base, right? That's giving them nothing but trouble and seems to win more than they lose, right?
Yeah.
So, just use that as an example from history. But it seems to me that they found their billionaire. Okay, they found their means into the halls of power,
Hmm.
and they already had a list of people to be taken out. Not
Hmm.
killed, but removed, identified. They had a mechanism for identifying people who were leaking, okay, information from the White House or
Hmm.
from the different departments. They knew where to look in the FBI, the CIA, and other federal administrations.
Hmm.
Okay, they understood which courts were going to block them, and every time Trump did something and a court blocked him, they were probably measuring the response. Right? It's like, okay, well, what's going on? We're in charge here.
Yeah.
There's one organization in particular that they definitely have had control over, because I think one member of their group made sure that it wasn't infiltrated by the CIA, and that's the NSA,
Right.
the National Security Agency. They're the ones with the computers and the servers that literally record everything in the world.
That's
Okay.
correct.
Now, if that was in the hands of the good guys, okay, plus the Pentagon, which was ready to launch a coup if Hillary was elected
Hmm.
because of what she did, of what Obama did to the military for 8 years. Um, you know, if you have control of the NSA and the Pentagon, all right, there you go. You have a power block.
Right.
You have the means to, and from that point on, you're sitting in the reactive position. You don't have to attack these people anymore. Now they're attacking you. You could sit on the defensive.
Yeah.
You're sitting safely in a seat of power, and from there you can jujitsu. You can use the tail to wag the dog now,
But
right?
a lot of people forget that Obama demoted a lot of 4 and 5-star generals.
He did. There was a purge. A lot of capable generals. Anybody went up against him and said this is not good. This is not a good idea. He'd fire them.
Yeah.
Right? He defunded a lot of their operations. They were behind in their even their purchases of ammunition, right, and missiles and things like that, like consumables. He spent an awful lot of time trying to make the army, LGBT friendly and transgender compliant and stuff
Hmm.
like that. Just things that have nothing to do with the running of a nation state. That sort of thing would be done at the state or community level.
Hmm.
That you couldn't make that. That was federal overreach,
It
especially
was
with something as
definitely, yeah.
important to America as the military. And the ridiculous thing is, the American military had been used by the banking cartels and these deep state people as their as their uh, as their muscle.
Hmm.
So why they would have sabotaged it the way they did indicates to me that they were about ready to collapse the whole thing.
Yeah. They were adding fuel to the
Because it
fire.
would make no sense. The U.S. military would have been lavishly funded even up till the end of the Obama presidency if they really intended to use it any further. I think they had decided that it had outlived its usefulness, and now it was just a matter of, getting Hillary in,
Destabilization.
destabilization, and creating enough emergencies and chaos that she could assume power,
Hmm.
which is similar to what Hitler did in the early 30s.
Yes.
I mean, he wasn't elected in a landslide at any point in time.
No, he
Uh,
wasn't.
he had to form a coalition government, but once the coalition government was formed, there was enough chaos in the streets, which his own SA, of course, was
And didn't he
responsible.
blow up his own building, the Reichstag?
Well, they burned the Reichstag, yeah. So
Yeah.
you had chaos.
Hmm.
They were spreading a lot of fear and upset among the population, and so he was able to pass the Enabling Act. And from that point on, he had essentially supreme power in
Enabling
Germany.
Act is almost like the what is it? The Patriot Act.
Well, they're the declaration of emergency or something like
That's
that.
right.
Yeah, that's right. So it was the same idea, right? So that's why I say it's a civil war among the elites. I'm not ready to say it's a battle of white hats against black hats.
No.
I'm not ready to go there because Trump right now has pretty much more power than any president has had in history. It's going to be a question of what he does with it.
That's
Now, I
correct.
see assertions in the comments that FEMA is actually running the country now.
No.
I doubt it. I doubt it. I'm not a constitutional expert. Okay, I'm just saying I doubt it. Otherwise, it wouldn't be Trump up there saying what he's saying.
Okay.
And I mean, he's still sparring with the media and all the rest of it. Nothing's changed in that regard.
All right.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Supreme, we're going to leave it at that. We're at our 1 hour mark here.
Sure. Okay.
We'll do a part
that's
3 when you're ready. We're gonna part 3 is gonna be called Checkmate. Checkmate.
Okay.
We'll work with that. We'll do a part 3 and work it up from what we've already discussed, and we'll go from there.
We'll see where events go in a week or so, Mike. Because in terms of that word checkmate, I know a lot of the QAnon fans on here are going to identify with that word right away. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I keep an eye on QAnon, but I'm neutral on it. I am actually neutral on it. It is a something. What it is, it doesn't matter if it's a scam or not. It doesn't matter. It's having an effect. It's building a following. It's solidifying a power block that didn't exist before.
That's right.
Okay. That's like the
global warming.
It's like a rebel leader raising an army. Mm-hmm. Okay. It works.
Like a global warming army.
Global warming, baby. If it works, it works. Yeah. That's all I'm going to say about that. Yeah, we'll see what the moves, what kind of moves happen this week, and we'll see if we can wrap it up with a part 3. Anyway, guys, my knowledge is not exhaustive by any means. A lot of you are way better read than me, and please feel free to comment or
comment below. Comment below.
Comment below. You bet. Okay. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.